tonight we're doing the last public meeting for the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan. The town has worked with local consultants, SE Group, to help us gather information from the community about what they'd like to see in our parks, open space, and trails. They've taken all of this information that they've gathered so far, and they've put it together and grouped it into 6 topics of interest. And tonight we've invited the community to come out and let us know what they think about the information that's been gathered so far. So we're at the Silverthorne Pavilion, and we're going to be talking to everyone that comes tonight that has an opinion about something in our community. And we are asking people to tell us what they like about things we already do, things that they'd like to see more of, less of, and new ideas as well. One of the other undertones tonight is we're going to be working with people to see what their interest might be in us having things in this community that bring more people here. You know, recreation, parks, open space, and trails as a catalyst for tourism. SE Group has set up a really nice presentation tonight. They're going to introduce some of the concepts that they have very briefly with everyone that comes, and then they're going to divide everyone in groups, and everyone's going to rotate around and get an opportunity to be heard on each of 6 topics.
If you all haven't met me, my name's Melissa Sherburne. I'm with SE Group. We are a consulting firm based in Frisco, and we've been assisting the town with this plan thus far. And with me is Claire Humber, and she's also with SE Group, and we'll both be giving you all an intro presentation tonight to kind of all get on the same page before we get into the fun part of the meeting, which is the actual planning. So as some of you know, we've had quite a bit of public input leading us up to this point. And so we just want to walk through everything that's gone into identifying opportunities thus far, which you'll hear much more about at each of the stations as you rotate through them tonight. So the first kind of component of our identifying opportunities is really public input. And one of the things that we have done is stakeholder interviews, and we've talked to over 35 people, organizations, agencies, just to get a really good feel for how things are working and where people want to see things going in the future. Some of the common values that we heard include how much people love the Blue River. You'll hear us refer to the comprehensive plan throughout the evening, and our firm was involved with that effort as well. Throughout that process, even though one of the main emphases was not necessarily recreation, we really talked about it quite a bit, and the value of the Blue River is really unique in Silverthorne. Other things that we heard is how well Rainbow Park serves the community, issues with connectivity, as well as opportunities building upon the Blue River Trail, things like that. The sport committee, you'll see people around the room that are on the sport committee, and they actually served as plan ambassadors for the project, and they went out into the community and conducted their own sort of mini stakeholder interviews as well, and talked to several people just to make sure that the people that we're talking to are a great kind of cross-section representation of the Silverthorne community. The next thing, kind of a big event for this process, was the open house. And that was just a couple short weeks ago, and that was part of Family Fun Night. And we had a great turnout. A lot of those people were there for Family Fun Night, but a lot of those people came just for the open house as well. I believe we talked to well over 100 people, and you can see there a group of people that were kind of honed in on the map. We brought the map here tonight to illustrate some of the ideas, and you're welcome to contribute more ideas to that map if you do have them. But it was a great way to kind of start the conversation. We did a green dot exercise to start exploring ideas and opportunities, and many of those directly translate to what you'll see this evening. The next thing that you may have seen or may not have seen in the mail, and hopefully you've seen it somewhere, either in the newspaper or on flyers around town, is the community survey. There were about 2,000 mailed out. Those are what we call statistically valid surveys. And of those, we've received about 119 so far. The survey has also been available online in English and in Spanish, and we've also received about 100 responses to those. Again, the goal is to get as wide of a cross-section as possible. As those results are still coming in, especially the mailback survey, we expect to get many more over the next couple of weeks. Those will be compiled and feed directly into this process. The last big event for this process is why we're here tonight, and we're calling this an opportunities workshop. And I think that'll be pretty obvious why we're calling that as we get into the exercise. So thank you so much for coming tonight. So the next kind of technical side of what we do for planning is our analysis. And I just want to mention a few different facets of our analysis. The first thing being mapping and inventory. And so what we like to do is really get a great understanding of every single one of your parks, open space properties, as well as your trails. And so we did a bike tour of all the parks. We did an open space tour to really get a feel for how things are working. It's really evident that the Recreation Center, Rainbow Park, is the epicenter for parks and recreation in Silverthorne. We know that there potentially are some shortcomings in service in certain neighborhoods that we'll discuss throughout the night. And we also know there's some opportunity areas. So you guys may be familiar with the area near Trent Park that's been identified for an expansion area. There's also South Maryland Creek Ranch is a large area that's been identified in the past for park development. And then also the Cottonwood Park area. There's two areas of Cotton Park. There's the lower bench, which is very natural, important wildlife area. But there's also the upper bench, which has been identified for more developed recreation. So we'll talk about those as opportunity areas. In terms of open space, you may or may not know that Silverthorne has a ton of open space. It's on the maps, but you might not know that there's actually public access to a lot of those areas. And so they're natural areas, water bodies, very beautiful places just to enjoy the outdoors, really. And then the last one is trails. And I've mentioned the Blue River Trail a couple times already, but we're not just looking within Silverthorne. We're looking at potential trail connections outside of Silverthorne. So on the National Forest, opportunities for mountain biking, more hiking as a gateway to wilderness, things like that. The next thing that we explored or conducted was the comparable communities analysis. And as part of a parks plan, we like to kind of gauge where Silverthorne sits in comparison with other similar communities. And so we identified Breckenridge, Avon, Carbondale, Steamboat Springs, as well as the Western Eagle County Rec District, which is a rec district that serves that entire area, all of the communities within that area. And without getting into the details of that, what we found is, in terms of parkland acreage, Silverthorne is very comparable to all of those places except for Steamboat Springs, which is kind of an anomaly. Steamboat's a lot bigger and also serves a much different regional purpose. It's kind of alone up there as the main community, whereas almost all of these other communities, if not all of them, are part of a collection, just as Silverthorne works together in Summit County with Breckenridge, Frisco, Keystone, et cetera, to provide a suite of recreational amenities. Then some of the conclusions that we found, just real quickly, partnerships are very important when you look at recreation to really maximize what you're doing. Epicenters of activity, having kind of a flagship location like, for example, Riverwalk Center in Breckenridge. Community identity. So for mountain communities, parks and recreation serve an even more important role than they do in, say, a suburban community, because people come here to recreate year-round. So it's even an elevated kind of role. The last one, standards kind of don't apply when you're doing parks planning in mountain communities, because our parks, they don't really fit into a nice, neat little category in the same way that they do in, say, the Front Range. The sizes are different, their functions are different. They serve a slightly different function. And the last one that's not on here is, or it is actually, is that there's really been a huge lull in parkland development, and we're seeing that just like the built environment, we're seeing that coming back online in a major way. Communities are ready to start reinvesting, and so the trend is hopefully on the upswing. Then Claire is going to talk about the market assessment.
One of the sort of unique components of the analysis work that we did for this project is the market assessment. And the reason we did that, again, getting back to the blueprint Silverthorne, the economic development element of the comprehensive plan identified recreation as an opportunity, and I'm quoting from the plan, to reinforce Silverthorne as a year-round destination for recreation and enjoyment of the outdoors, drawing more and more people to the community. So the ability to draw people to Silverthorne through recreation. So, here we are working on the parks, open space and trails master plan. It's like, well, what does that mean to that part of recreation in Silverthorne? So we really needed to sort of look to the broader marketplace to understand what those opportunities might be. And the components of that included understanding who the users are going to be. And first and foremost, the permanent resident population of Silverthorne is the most important user group. But it's not the only user group, because there's also a big contingency of second homeowners in Silverthorne. And then you have the larger Summit County population. And again, you have full-time residents and you have part-time residents. And they interact with things that happen in Silverthorne as well. I mean, you look at the rec center and ask people, where are you from? Not everyone that's in the Silverthorne Rec Center is from Silverthorne. And then in addition to that, you have this tremendous transient population that comes and goes, whether they stay overnight in one of the many hotels or in one of the condos, or whether they just come up for the day. So to be able to understand, beyond the full-time resident population, beyond the second home residents of Silverthorne, who those other users are and what they might be looking for, as a means to get them to come to Silverthorne, again, which is part of the comprehensive plan initiative for economic development. The other thing we need to understand is, what is there to do in Summit County, and how does Silverthorne fit within that? And as I don't need to tell any of you, there's a tremendous amount going on in this area: activities, events, festivals, all sorts of things. So to be really able to understand what's available and who that appeals to. So there are certain things that really draw that transient population, people that are coming to visit. And then there are things that are really targeted toward the residents of the county. We need to be able to understand that, so that when we think about what should happen here, that it will complement and fit into that context rather than compete. And lastly, that sort of leads us to the conversation about, well, what is unique about Silverthorne? As you drive around the county, how are all the different areas different, and what makes Silverthorne unique? What are the attractors that will really encourage people or make people want to come here? We've already talked about the Blue River. We talked about the chain of lakes. There's a tremendous water resource here that doesn't exist anywhere else in the county. You have this great, unique bike path along the river that's, you were saying earlier, it's built for comfort, not for speed. If you really want to get your cycling on, you probably wouldn't come to this bike path. But if you're teaching your kids how to ride, or you're going out for a picnic for the day, it's a perfect place to be. And you also have, and Melissa just mentioned this, tremendous amount of open space, and tremendous views for almost anywhere within Silverthorne. So those are things that we want to understand as we start to look at these opportunities, and we'll talk about this a lot at the different stations as we go through the exercise tonight. But it's really important because of the economic development component or potential behind the sort of recreation initiative, that we really understand who the people are, what they want to do, what's here for them already, and what might be missing that Silverthorne can provide.
So in addition, this is the last kind of facet of our analysis that led us up to this point today. We do a very detailed policy review. And so the last plan that was done is, I believe, 13 years old. I believe it was done in 2001. So it's quite dated at this point. It served the sport committee very well. It's the sport committee's kind of guiding document. But it's time for an update. The vision has changed. Obviously, the development world has changed, and how we actually get parks into our communities has changed quite a bit. So So we look closely at the current plan. We also look at the other plans that I've mentioned a few of them. Some other ones, in addition to Cottonwood, South Maryland Creek Ranch, Trent Park, there have been a number of other ones, including the Blue River Trail Master Plan. There have been some concepts for a whitewater park. There have been also ideas for other recreation areas. So all of that feeds into our analysis, and we need to figure out if those ideas are really current and meeting today's vision. Then, last but not least, what Claire mentioned and I mentioned before as well is the blueprint Silverthorne. We're coming right off the heels of that, and as I said earlier, that was really something, recreation is really something that obviously is really treasured by the community, but it's also a huge opportunity potentially for economic development and to improve the quality of life for Silverthorne residents. So that feeds into our analysis. So here we are today. One thing that we hear loud and clear is that the parks, open space, and trails are serving the community really well in terms of recreation. But what's the next big move? Is it a new trend? Is it building upon your water resources? So that's what we want to really get into tonight. So we want your feedback. And as you visit each station, and I'll explain the instructions here in 1 minute, but we need your input so that we can take everything that we talk about tonight, refine the opportunities, and really start master planning for the future of these resources. We're going to look at locations. The locations that you see on the maps are not necessarily recommendations tonight, so that's an important nuance. You'll see icons on the maps. Don't get hung up that those are exact locations. They're just potential locations that could work. So we'd like your feedback on those. And then we also want to talk about the benefits of all of these ideas and the costs to the community. So going back to what Claire was talking about with the market assessment, many of these ideas directly serve the local community, but also they have the potential to bring more visitors in and generate revenue for the town of Silverthorne, either directly through, say, user fees, or indirectly, just to get people to kind of hang out and linger in town. So we're going to talk about that in more detail. So in terms of the instructions, we call this exercise speed planning because each of you will go to each station for approximately 15 minutes. When you got a name tag, your name tag should have a number on them. So that's the first station that you should go to. And if we see that the groups are, one group is much larger, we're just going to rearrange you guys because we want an even distribution of people. It doesn't matter which group you start in because you'll go to every single station.
This station is all about doing something different. And Silverthorne is already sort of dialed into that because you think about stand-up paddleboarding didn't exist 10 years ago, but we have the facility to accommodate that as it comes online. Pickleball, another thing that is very popular now in Silverthorne. It's a relatively new thing to do. Different kinds of racing. You guys do a triathlon here. That's become more and more popular. It's funny, a lot of sports kind of go in a wave, right? Like skateboarding. When I was a kid, skateboarding was really popular, and now it's popular again. It hasn't remained up there the whole time. When we so Melissa talked about the community survey and the stakeholder interviews and the open house, and some of the things that come out when we talk about doing something different in Silverthorne are, what about a dog park? Let's not forget to serve the locals. It should complement whatever we're doing down in the downtown core that the comprehensive plan talked about. It should be non-resort. So, you guys have a lot of resorts in this county. It should be something different than that. What about bike sharing? Should be good for year-round. What about a community recreation site? So these are things, and you'll see this. This is standard for all the different stations. So you'll see this over and over again with the different topics. When we took the community input, went through the analysis that we did, looked at the market assessment, some of the things, and can everybody see this? Because we can sort of pull it out and look a little closer. So this is the map of Silverthorne. So, well, I just want to make sure that people can sort of see what I'm talking about. So here's I-70, and here's the reservoir. So when we think about, okay, well, what are some of the new things that could happen here? Well, things that have come up in conversation, dog parks. A lot of people are talking about, there's no dog park in Summit County. We should have a dog park in Silverthorne. More things for bikes. So, mountain biking has really sort of evolved in the last 5 years, where you have downhill parks now. The cross country still remains, but there are a lot of other fun things like little pump tracks or skills parks that little kids really love to do, as well as the big kids. So it sort of broadens that market. Maybe there should be more for biking in Silverthorne. Disc golf, another thing that has become popular again over the last couple of years. Maybe there should be a disc golf course somewhere in Silverthorne. And then, a lot of new ideas have come out. There's been a lot of conversations about team building things. So, challenge courses where you go with your team, school groups, work groups, church groups, scouts, and you do some sort of skills. Whether it's, these guys are walking across a high wire, a tightrope. Is there a challenge course or some kind of team building opportunity somewhere? Fitness courses, what about paddle boats? We have all these lakes, maybe there should be more than just bring your own stand-up paddleboard. Climbing walls, that's been a good conversation. Segway tours. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen what a Segway is, but resorts have started using off-road Segways as a way to allow people to sort of tour through their areas, and maybe there's an opportunity, a revenue-generating opportunity, to use the bike path for tours that start down at the outlet area or start in the downtown core. Other ideas, snow bikes. So has anybody seen the Fat Tire biking? So mountain biking now has a winter alternative, and there's a Nordic facility here. Maybe that would be a good place for snow bikes. And a gravity park. So everybody knows what happened in Frisco. They did that. They've got that great tubing center, bike center. Maybe there's some opportunity to do something like that here in Silverthorne. So when we looked at that, these are great ideas, but then you have to sort of look at the town and say, well, where could those happen? So, we've got certain parts of town that have park space where some of these things could occur. The South Maryland Creek Ranch property, huge amount of open space, already committed to the town. Is that a good place for a dog park? It's very remote. It's sort of at the edge of town. But as someone pointed out to me recently, nobody ever walks their dog to a dog park. People drive to a dog park. So, maybe that's actually a really good place because it's, big piece of land, lots of opportunity for parking. Maybe that's also a good place for disc golf. The Cottonwood Park area, the upper bench. The Cottonwood Park is right in here.
Is it near the elementary school?
Someone who knows the town better than I, yes.
North of the elementary.
Yeah.
It's north of the elementary and south of the water treatment plant.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, right, perfect. And there's an upper and lower bench to it. So we're talking about so that's another opportunity. Maybe there could be a dog park there. Or, it's a park space that is yet to be developed. So, maybe there are other new opportunities. Maybe that would be a great place for, a team building place. Maybe that would be a good place to start the bikes. That is the one end of the bike path, right? So, the other end is down here by the ball field. So, maybe there's an opportunity for bike rentals or something at those two endpoints, or down in the downtown core. So then the other areas for potentially for some new ideas, again down by the ball fields and the rodeo ground, adjacent to Rainbow Park. There's a big focus in the comprehensive plan of that being the sort of downtown core area, or up at Trent Park. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about. Now, things that we really need to consider when we think about these new ideas is that balance between community benefit and cost. Some of these things cost more than others, and if there's a revenue generation, then that can offset the cost. But if there isn't, then we have to sort of weigh, well, is there a community benefit that makes that cost okay? We need to think about the location and the uses relative to who's using them. So again, if we're bringing people into the community, to do something, then we want to make sure that it's in a location that is okay for public use, for outside use. So we wouldn't want to put that, in the middle of a neighborhood at a neighborhood park, where you would be increasing traffic in areas where you wouldn't want to increase traffic. So that's something important to think about. And the zone of impact. So again, if you have a public use, there's going to be parking, there could be more traffic, there could be noise, there could be lights. So we need to think about those things when we think where should things be located. And then lastly, the community identity, is it consistent with what we think Silverthorne is and what's important and what the vision for the community is? And how does that fit, again, how does that fit within the regional marketplace? So we want to make sure that we're complementing, not competing, so that everybody wins. So those are things that we've been thinking about. Now what I want to do for the rest of our time together is hear what you guys have been thinking about.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about water resources, and I'm just going to take you guys saw through your last station, kind of the format that we're running. So we'll start with existing conditions. And some of the existing conditions we have are a lot of fly fishing, some kids fishing, public ponds and lakes, just little areas to sit and take in the beauty and the views. And then also river crossings and seating areas. And some things that we've noticed in these existing conditions are that Silverthorne has really unique water resources, and some of the best really in Summit County. And so some of the input that we've heard about these resources are how awesome these chain of lakes are. And we have a couple of lakes that run through the town of Silverthorne. People have been very vocal about how great that is to have. And then some other things we've heard are water quality and maintaining that gold medal status for fishing that the Blue River has right now. And then some other you can read are kayak park, rafting, the views, just having that resource running through the town. We say that it kind of holds the town together. It's the backbone of the town because people come to recreate and come to enjoy the views. So we have identified kind of 4 major areas of potential opportunity. And so one of the first is kayak park. And this idea has been brought up before, and we're just revisiting it to see what potential people would like to hear. And then boating opportunities and access for boating opportunities. And then this chain of lakes idea, how do you really get visitors to come and enjoy these lakes, or just people in the community to enjoy these lakes? And then lastly, fishing. We've heard a lot of support for the fishing on Blue River and to maintain that gold medal status. And so some considerations that we've heard, or considerations for water resources, are the character and the water quality, and how do we maintain that character and maintain that water quality. And then accessibility and connectivity between the water resources, safety and water management, and then lastly a range of activities and users on these different bodies of water and how they interact. So I don't know, how do you guys use either the lakes or the Blue River, or what do you think could be improved?
Some of the examples that we have now, or some of the ideas about what we're talking about, are community gardens. We have River's Edge Plaza, festivals that take place in some of these public spaces. This is a picture of the Pumpkin Fest that we have in the fall right here at the pavilion and out in the field out here. And then the crossover between these commercial areas and the public spaces. We just have a picture of kind of the Outlet Mall Bridge down here because it's a good example of, you have the outlet shopping, you also have a lot of people kind of enjoying the Blue River and fishing and stuff. So during this process, some of the key words, key ideas that we've heard are things like farmers markets, plazas, music, art in the park, plazas and parks that complement downtown, community gardens overlooking the blue, food, festivals, play areas. So some ideas, let me just switch over. Some of the ideas that have come out of the process are different kinds of parks. Art parks, where you have some sort of installation art or music installation pieces in the park. You have plazas with recreation anchors. This is a picture of the 16th Street Mall, and the idea is that there's sort of some sand and play areas in the middle of this, in the middle of sort of a commercial corridor. Spaces for festivals, music, and events. Gardens, alpine gardens, children's gardens, interactive sculpture gardens, and then finally would be pocket parks, which are just, small little parklets that are kind of tucked inside of more developed areas. So what we want to know is, what are your thoughts? Do you have any ideas about public spaces, public places in town that you like or you'd like to see here?
We're here to talk about trails and connectivity and to kind of get a glimpse of existing conditions. We've talked a little bit about the Blue River Trail and what a fantastic amenity that is for people that live in Silverthorne as well as in Summit County. I know a lot of people just come over to ride the trail, and it's a different type of experience than the other bike paths in Summit County. You also have a number of National Forest Trail connections there's several trailheads, Ptarmigan, Angler Mountain, and the Willow Creek Trailhead onto National Forest and Mesa Cortina. You've got a start to a good system of sidewalks and on-street bike lanes. However, we have heard from a number of people that that's an area that really needs improvement. Just moving through town, so whether or not you're going from the transit center to your job at Lowe's, to school, to Rainbow Park, wherever that might be, we realize that that's a potential improvement area. And then the other thing that we wanted to point out is that Highway 9 is, it can be a barrier. In town is significantly better than as you move northwards. There's a number of signaled crossings that people can utilize. However, as you move northward, if you live in, say, Willowbrook or Eagle's Nest, getting across Highway 9 to the Blue River Trail is very difficult. You can obviously jaywalk, but we wouldn't promote that as the safe way to get across the highway. Then some of the things that we've heard from people are that safety is a big concern. Cyclists, we're talking about recreation here as well, not just connectivity for function, but for fun. Cyclists right now want to get through town as quickly as possible, so identifying an on-street route for them to bypass as many of the barriers that they see would be great. More sidewalks. The connection at the elementary school is not fantastic, so people would like to see that improved. The idea that partnerships can really further trail improvements, and we see this in many of the other communities in Summit County, in places like Aspen and Steamboat Springs, where they realize that trail improvements are not something that a town has to take on by themselves. They can really partner with volunteer organizations, with the National Forest, to form these cooperative agreements so that their trails can be improved, and they can see the benefits of that. So in terms of specific opportunities, one thing that we've talked about on our planning team and that we've heard interest from the community for is mountain biking. And nearly every other community in Summit County has fabulous mountain biking. Silverthorne does not. And it's partially because you guys have wilderness so close to town, and you're very, very constrained. You can't mountain bike in wilderness areas. But there's two places where you could improve mountain biking. And we've talked with the Fat Tire Society, as well as had conversations with the town and other stakeholders that it's worth exploring perhaps, but connections to the Williams Fork area, starting at the Ptarmigan Trailhead, which is a very steep approach just to get to the main trail. That's not great for mountain biking. That could be improved, and then you could continue northward to the entire system of trails in the Williams Fork area. The other area is in building off of the Salt Lick Trail, which is just south of Wilderness there. So that's mountain biking. Another idea that's come up is the Silverthorne Loop Trail, And that was identified in 2001 as something that the community wanted to see. It's not a new trail per se, but it's connecting existing trails, essentially a mapping exercise. There would need to be some new connections because if you're, say, crossing from east to west, there's not a great connection up north that would allow you to do that. But it's really identifying where that loop could happen for people that are interested in a 15, 20, 30-mile trail experience. The next one is a highway crossing. And so the place that we've identified as the most kind of bang for your buck would be at the Willowbrook Road and Highway 9 intersection. I'd say it's about a mile north of here at the Willowbrook Trent Park.
2 miles.
2 miles? You think it's that far from here? So that would really open up this side. If you live in Willowbrook or Eagle's Nest or the Three Peaks area, right now you really can't get across Highway 9. So that a crossing there would allow you to safely cross the highway, access the Blue River Trail, continue to whatever your destination is. Maybe it's downtown, maybe it's the rec center, etc. Right now we've discussed an overpass and we've discussed an underpass. Both are extremely expensive and out of the scope of this process to design anything of that kind, but we do want to identify whether or not there's community support for that. A wildlife overpass or underpass is something that takes years and years to study, and there's been work on the Vail Pass wildlife. I believe that's I don't know if it's an underpass or an overpass, but that's been in the works for like 10 years. But this, we're talking about a pedestrian or a bike crossing at this location specifically. I'm not sure I know. Can you point to where you're talking about?
By the elementary school.
Oh, right here? So that's phase 6 of the Blue River Trail.
What is that plan?
So that's already been approved. The alignment is shown on the map. I know there's potentially some...
That map that's on the ground?
No, that cuts off actually. But there is the plan is to continue it northward and then link it back into Highway 9. And then that's the terminus of the Blue River Trail. So I believe in the Cottonwood area. So just north of Cottonwood Park.
All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started because we really only have 15 minutes, probably 13 by now. So I'm going to be really brief and talk about what we've got. This is Sports and Athletics Station here. And what we found that we've got going on really well is our Rainbow Park and everything that's going on there, the field, the multi-purpose use field, the skateboard park, the sand volleyball courts, both playgrounds and the back track, all of that. So that, as well as Trent Park, our existing parks we're finding are really serving our community needs well. We did go to the community for input, and these are a lot of things that what the community is saying that relates back to sports and athletics. Specifically, we're hearing more fields, more indoor activities, a field house, lacrosse, complement the downtown and what we're doing there, rugby, skating, keep things affordable, and more ice. Okay, so these are some of the things that we're hearing from our community. We're taking those and putting those on our idea and opportunity boards here. And what you'll see here is field house, fields, again, kind of repeating, skate park expansion, and sports complex. So these are all potential opportunities. Bring that a little closer. These are the same maps you've been seeing all around, and so your orientation here is I-70. The idea is a potential use for field house or expanding the sports complex area down below the ball fields. So just to clarify for you guys right there, those currently are owned by Denver Water Board. They own all of that property down there. Right now that's being managed by the county. There's an opportunity to potentially manage that property or work with Denver Water Board in a partnership opportunity. So that's kind of what we're thinking or looking at there. Our skate park is currently at Rainbow Park. There is an idea for an expansion right beside that current park for more skating opportunities. And as you go north, we have Trent Park expansion right here. So that is the Willowbrook area, if you're familiar with that. There's a whole plot of land that the town owns right there besides Willowbrook. There's potential for fields also by the elementary school location. It's Cottonwood Park area on the upper bench there. There's potential, as well as South Maryland Creek area up here, okay? So considerations, things that we should think about. This area here is about 20 acres, Cottonwood Park's about 6, and then Trent Park expansion is about 8. We want to definitely consider the zone of impact, accessibility, parking, lighting. Is that appropriate for that area? Is it not? We also want to consider economic impacts of putting that there, putting fields there, putting a field house here, a sports complex there. Do we want to draw regionally? Do we want to draw people into this area or not? Do we want to just hit the local market? And then just a reminder that this area here is currently owned by the Denver Water Board. Okay, so that's kind of sports and athletics in a nutshell, and I want to hear from you guys.
Last station of the evening, I think. All right, so what we're talking about here is the great outdoors, and what we're classifying or what we're calling the great outdoors. That's all of a sudden crooked. So this is, the way I think of it, this is your interaction with the natural environment, both within the town and the surrounding landscape. So as we're exploring this, what we think of are, for the great outdoors and getting out there, are trailheads and access to the surrounding national forest or wilderness areas, open space areas within the town. And for this planning process, we're considering open space as town-owned land. There's a lot of private open space out there as well that's usually driven by a development or something like that, where they need to set aside some lands for conservation purposes. But for what we're looking at, we're talking about those town-owned parcels that are within the town limits. Neighborhood connections to the national forest or to different open space areas. What do those look like? How do you guys use them? And then a big component within the town is rivers, lakes, and ponds. For a community this size, there's certainly an abundance of those resources, and how should those be factored into this planning process and be considered. So that's what we're looking at. Part of the existing conditions through the planning process, this is some of the feedback that we've received so far that relates to the outdoor experience, family outdoor playground, views, connection with the forest. The Blue River obviously is a big component to this, and wildlife habitat. Those are just some of the buzzwords and terms that have been thrown out there thus far in the planning process. So that's part of it. This works into the ideas and opportunities. So these are areas within the town that we've identified and broken this into really 4 categories for the time being. Obviously there's more out there, but for right now that's where we stand with it. One is access. So how do you access the national forest? Where do you access the national forest? Is there parking? Things like that. Those are considerations that we need to make. Wildlife habitat, wildlife corridors, those areas with open space, or those areas through neighborhoods that have high wildlife values. Views. Views are all throughout the community, but are there any views in particular that we should know about that should be preserved or protected, or the experience could be enhanced for more people to see those, or for more people to understand where those are even located. And then last on our list is family outdoors. So this is kind of an exploratory concept for us, where it's looking at areas within the town that have potential for a better family experience that you might not know about. There are pockets all throughout the community where they might be good for picnicking or for overnight camping or things like that. So we've identified those different locations on this map, but certainly want to hear from you all if you have ideas or areas that you know of that you want to talk about. some of the considerations that we need to make as we move through this planning process. Partnerships, whether that's with private landholders or stakeholders or the National Forest, being a big neighbor in this process, and then and the costs of some of those. Some of these activities and the preservation of areas don't come without some types of financial costs, so those need to be considered moving forward. Accessibility and parking, that's big on trailheads and access. You can have all the trailheads you want, but if no one knows how to find them or they don't have enough parking spaces, they're not really doing their job. So we're going to consider those as we move forward. All right, so that's where we stand right now. We certainly want to hear from you all, though, if you have any ideas that you want us to know about or consider as we move through this.